Okay. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for tuning in out there. My name is Sebastian Streifert. I will be your moderator today. I work with growth at the Swedish tech company Beechert, and from all of Beechert, we're happy to see so many viewers already tuned in. Today's discussion is going to cover questions such as, what is CSRD? What are some issues one might run into during implementation? And does it really make a difference? So that's what I have in store. But before we get to that, I wanted to kind of start this with, well, we might call it an icebreaker. Uh, what mood are you in today? Or let's say, what mood are you in right now? Because I know this is, if you're in Europe, we're getting close to the evening. If you're in the US, your day's just starting. So that might call for a different mood. We're not going to radically change how we do this based on your mood, all of you listeners, but it's nice for us to know how you will be enjoying the things we have to say, at least. So if you just write in the chat numbers 1, 2, 3 through to 9, and we'll get an idea of how you feel today. Hope we get a variety. I hope we get very few number 2s and number 8s. I don't know. Do we have? I think personally, I'm number 5 today. I think that's the mood I need to be in in order to host such amazing people. And I do see a lot of 5s in the chat. I see some 6, some 9. That's good. I mean, the 6, I would say, is so-so. But the 9, I think that's good. That's the best we can hope for. And let's shortly get into it. So this panel, as you probably figured out, it's organized by Beechert. We're doing this because we genuinely deeply care about making the world a better place, and we believe that a big part of that is to walk the walk. Beechert is an ecosystem of multiple companies. We do different things, one of which is to help tech companies with software development. We're also running a help fund to aid Ukraine. We're running an ed tech that helps educate people so that they can get into the tech industry. And once they're in, we upskill them and their departments in the latest tech. And we love particularly to work with companies that really share our values. And I hope that you, as a viewer here today, share many of our values too. I know that hopefully most of our panel viewers, broadly speaking, do. And it's time for me to introduce them. And please forgive me if I get your names wrong. That's just how it is sometimes, but I'm going to do my best. I mean, the pronunciation. First out, we have Rana Ersgård, co-CEO of Beechert with over 20 years in health tech and IT, non-profit board member, and personally, I'd say a champion for sustainability. Hello, Rana.
Hi, thank you for introducing me. It was muted.
Yeah, I was waiting for the hi, just so people hear the voice. And we also have with us Claudia Chevaliuk, strategic sustainability consultant and at Rumble Management Consulting. 20 years of managing major climate resilience projects internationally. That's a lot of years, including collaborations with the UNDP and embassies. Hello, Claudia.
Hi, everyone. Nice to join this conversation. Looking forward.
Very happy to have you with us. We also have Pete Jefferson, Senior VP at Branch Pattern. And Pete is an expert with 20 plus years in sustainable building science. You've been driving decarbonization and high performance, environmentally friendly building projects for a long time. Welcome, Pete.
Thank you for having me. Excited to talk with you all.
That's good. I like the energy. And last but not least, we have Johan Löfqvist, Head of Sustainability Data at World Favor. Johan, you have specialized in ESG reporting and digital transformation within the EU's regulatory framework for over 7 years. That's a long time to be in this niche. And today you're leading a team of sustainability specialists. So hello, Johan, and welcome.
Hello there. Nice to be here with you today.
And I'll say that I'm very happy to have specifically the 4 of you with me because you have been handpicked. You have unique expertise and experience in this area. And I think I would like to jump into the first question. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen here. And my first question will go to you, Johan. As a specialist in ESG reporting, we have now the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. what is it exactly, and how is it different from the older ways of reporting on sustainability, in your opinion?
How much time do I have?
Yeah.
No, but jokes aside, it's replacing an existing EU legislation called Non-Financial Reporting Directive, yeah, how it differs, I'd say it's pretty similar to GRI for those who are aware of that standard and have done some sustainability reporting in the past. It's quite uplift from the current directive that is in place. It's much more. That's one way to summarize it. It includes requirements on double materiality, which wasn't the case previously. And that really sets the bar for the whole sort of regulation. You need to conduct a double materiality assessment, so identifying your material impacts, risk and opportunities throughout your whole value chain. And that's also a new thing, that it includes the value chain perspective. It covers more companies, also has a standard connected to it, so you need to actually follow that and report on certain, not only numerical KPIs, but a lot of quantitative information and so on. So it's something big when it comes to sustainability reporting.
It definitely sounds like it. Do we have any other perspectives on this, or maybe Johan framed it quite?
If I may, I can add a couple of new requirements according to CSRD. So to add to what just Johan said, that the new requirements is to have a standard of the reporting, actually, and above double materiality that was mentioned, in contrast to materiality assessment that was previously in an FRD. It should look like as an integrated reporting. So because for the first time, the double materiality assess both non-financial and financial impacts, as well as the new requirement is that it should be digital. So I know that for Beetroot is especially essential question.
And I'm going to assume that we have a very well-read audience here today. But for those of our listeners who are not, what is double materiality? I don't know. Somebody wants
do you want to go, Claudia?
Yes, of course, like double materiality principle that is introduced into CSRD. It actually helps to assess and identify ESG impacts, risks, and opportunity across the value chain. So basically, in contrast to materiality assessment, it helps to, as already mentioned, to measure both financial and non-financial impact, which is quite new. Would you like to add?
No, I think that was well put. So both an inside out and outside in perspective. And it lifts some aspects that was neglected, especially with NFRD, is that companies have tended to perhaps prioritize and focus on the things they have a positive impact on, and neglecting things that they might have a negative impact on, especially further down in their supply chain, for example. So trying to capture those parts as well.
Okay, thank you. Pete, being based in the US, you might have a slightly different perspective on this. What would you say are the main differences in how sustainability is reported and followed up under EU CSRD on one hand compared to the US?
Sure. Also, I could ask how long do we have, because it's really complicated here in the United States. I was thinking about this, though, in terms of the American perspective and speaking with European panelists and largely a European audience, too. I think one reason for optimism, if you're not in the US, is that while the US probably made a lot of international news in terms of pulling out of the Paris Agreement, the private sector really did step forward and fill that gap. And so even though as a nation, we had deprioritized that, almost every single public traded company in the United States is doing some form of ESG reporting. I think the last time I saw it was over 90%. I would say right now, if you're not doing ESG reporting as a public company in the US, it's as much a political statement as anything. Those companies are taking strong stances almost against it. So almost everybody's doing it. The issue is have 100 different sustainability and ESG frameworks out there for how people are doing it. So I think what we are seeing coming out of the EU with CSRD, right, is some structure to that that is hopefully helping to influence what's happening in the United States. So I think the other thing too to point out for those that are not here in the States is we've had a 200-year-long debate politically that has separated two political parties about whether things should be done at the federal level or at the state level. And so that adds a lot of complexity too. Most of what's being talked about at the federal level really relates to the Security Exchanges Commission, which really only impacts publicly traded companies. So when you talk about federal regulations in the US, it's really about large companies that are publicly traded, and it's single materiality. So it is only, the new SEC rules really only apply to things that are material to investors. So not exciting, right? That's not going to really drive a whole bunch of change. It's a start, but not where we want to be, and certainly not as aggressive as the EU. But the complexity really comes in that what's happening at the state level. If we look at California, on its own, California would be the 5th largest economy in the world, just behind Germany. And so we've seen in other sectors, what California does, the rest of the nation follows. Because if you're going to operate a business that even works in the state of California, if say you're an automaker, California established more aggressive fuel economy standards than the US. And so automakers don't want to make two different versions of the car. California led on getting rid of flame retardants in materials, which again, emulating what was happening in the EU, and then that got spread out. So at California's level, we're seeing a lot more replication. It's double material, it's scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. It's much more aligned with what's happening at the EU level. And so our hope is that that's going to drive organizations that are larger in the US to essentially replicate that.
Right. So you're saying that I know it's complex, and it really depends on which state you're looking at.
Right.
And I mean, it makes me think that Rana, maybe you can share your perspective. Do you think that the CSRD that we have in Europe now, do you think it's actually helping with real sustainability efforts, or do you think it just adds more red tape?
I think it will. Maybe it's too early to call. I hope it does, and I think it will. But it's also new in a way. And like Claudia mentioned, one of the good things is that it's coming in a standardized format a little bit more now. So we will get more of that transparency, comparability, and maybe, not sure if this is the right term, but it's a little bit of shaming because it will become so visible. So that in itself might be a driver for real actions as well. So I think that, I mean, reporting in itself, of course, that's one thing, but it's a tool. It's to achieve something else, and more companies also. I mean, we're talking about legislation in the US, but I think that it will become harder and harder to kind of separate geographically. We do ESG efforts here, but not here, because it's multinational companies and supply chains are across the world. And so it will have a trickle down effect as well. So I'm hopeful, but we will see how it goes once people start reporting things in the same way to start with, which is one of the points of the regulation as well.
Just to add to what Rana has just said, I think it's important to remember that the key aim of CSRD was to eliminate greenwashing. So finally, we have a standard that helps to make companies more transparent and understandable for their stakeholders. So this is the key aim, that why companies should do this.
And I would also just echo that and say that in the field that we work in, which is real estate, and so we support the decarbonization of the built environment, which is think responsible for over 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The conversations we're having with large organizations who typically operate both in North America and the EU is they don't want to have what they call a green European portfolio of buildings and a brown North American portfolio there. So even if North America lags a bit, I think starting with CSRD and that reporting, we're going to see that push out into the way that they do things in North America.
Just to add another perspective then, just for the sake of it, because everyone's been very positive, I say that there is still a risk of, like, it feels as, I was there when NFRD was being launched, and then the wish was for everything to sort of, become transparent and so on. And even though the requirements are higher and it's much more structured, and we have the ESR standard, there might be still a risk that companies just doing it on like a compliance level. And to comply with this legislation, everything is based on your double materiality, and that is probably what's mostly being assessed by the auditors. And you could affect the outcome of that double materiality, so you have to report on as little as possible. There was some parts that was mandatory, the climate part and on workforce and so on, but that was removed when the final legislation was voted for. So there might be a risk the companies sort of opt out on certain things because they say it's not material. Then they might be criticized because the double materiality analysis is poor, but still. So if you want to comply, you don't have to do that much.
And so it seems like there's space to be optimistic, but also space to be a bit not concerned, but let's wait and see.
Yeah, but I'm also optimistic. I just wanted to share that perspective as well.
But I mean, you are probably interacting with a lot of clients and potential clients of yours out there. What is the general vibe you're getting from, especially most recently? Do you think a lot of companies are just looking to check boxes to look more sustainable? Is that a vibe that's happening, or are people coming to you with genuine concern to do this in the best way possible?
I'd say most feel that the reporting itself is the hard part, and most companies still haven't realized that the hard part probably lies in doing stuff internally, integrating this into your business strategy, really understand your role when it comes to sustainability, your role in the value chain, what effects that has, and so on, and not perhaps how much stuff they need to get in place to have something to report on. So many comes like, how are we going to do the reporting, and like what KPIs should we report on and stuff like that. And that's not going to be the big work. The big work is going to be the change management, setting new procedures, integrating this into existing processes, and a lot of change management. So I think that is sort of the hurdle. Like the reporting itself goes pretty easy if you have a lot of things to say. And if you don't have anything really to say, then you will look, I'm not going to say stupid, but then your reporting will not be as insightful.
Yeah, that makes sense. You want to add something to that? Somebody? No?
Sorry, I was just going to, reflecting on that a little bit too, beyond checking boxes, I do think there's a pretty powerful financial lever that's being pulled in the US. And so I mentioned what's happening at the federal level and then what's happening at the state level in California, but at the local and city level too. New York passed Local Law 97, which is going to financially penalize building owners for consuming more energy than what is allowed. And those are pretty severe penalties. And so we're starting to see asset managers and developers thinking about those forthcoming penalties, not just in New York, but what happens is that spreads, and it's more than just checking a box. People are starting to dig into it and figure out what is the risk of having buildings that are tied to natural gas lines, right? Or what happens if they're in wildfire areas or coastal flooding areas? So the material impact of climate change on those properties, what we're seeing is sparking some real change in action. And I think the frameworks are providing some criteria for it. And some people are greenwashing for sure, which is why we welcome more regulation on it. But I think people are getting savvier and starting to dig in and put some real teeth into assessing and evaluating those portfolios.
If I may, I would like to add on that actually it is a chance and an opportunity for businesses to structure their sustainability work and to transform the whole business into a more sustainable pathway. So basically, while doing double materiality assessments, while engaging your local stakeholders, you open up new opportunities and new ways, new targets where to head. So consider it not as an obligation, but as a chance for the transformation.
Yeah, well, plus one on that. It is a pathway or like guidelines on like what you should do essentially. So it's really great in that way, even though it's a very complex written guideline about how you should proceed. But if it's okay to ask a question to Jeff, you mentioned there was like a lot of different own frameworks when it comes to sustainability reporting, and what Claudia said, are companies in the US starting to look at ESRS and CSRD and like trying to adopt their reporting towards that, or is there any trends like that going on?
Definitely. I think if an organization is large enough to work both in the US and in the EU, they've probably graduated to a size where it's not just a single person in the organization doing ESG reporting. They typically will then have departments at this point. And I think any business department wants to find efficiencies. They don't want to do things completely different. So I think with CSRD coming first, and then what's happening in the US lagging a bit there, they're going to look at establishing CSRD as the standard, the precedent for what they do, and probably then pull the other standards along with it there as much as they can. There's always extra work, right, in any sort of regulatory framework where you feel you're doing things multiple times and creating some inefficiencies. But I do think they want to try to tackle things and at times set the most aggressive precedent out there is their baseline, essentially, that then drives everything else they're doing.
Yeah, Claudia.
Yeah, I maybe have another question to Pete also, because sure. I was wondering, when we first received an ECRS standard and we were looking at it, I saw a lot of similarity with the SASB materiality tool. So how much SASB Sustainability Accounting Standard Board standard is used in the US nowadays? Or as said, are US companies more looking into the ESRS standards as a more in-depth analysis?
Sure, and I can really only speak for the real estate sector, right? But it is a large sector within the US. SASB, as we say it here in the US, is fairly popular. And I think, though, it is part of what we call the alphabet soup of frameworks that are out there right now. I think that's one. There's, I think within real estate, we use GRESB quite a bit, which is the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. That one is probably the most popular in US real estate because it essentially provides industry benchmarks there. So if you work in office buildings, for example, your performance is compared against other office building developers. If you're in the industrial or logistics sector, you're compared to that. What I actually really like about that standard is it is a moving target. So the leaders in that sector, and I'll name drop Prologis, for example, in the industrial sector. They're a multinational company. They're doing development in the United States and in Europe. They essentially set the bar that everybody else is trying to meet. And so each year, Prologis does better and better work. They implement new and innovative strategies to try to decarbonize their built environment, electrify fleets of vehicles beyond just automobiles. It's also the transportation industry too. Everybody else is trying to play catch up to them because they don't want their score to slide backwards each year that Prologis moves forward. And so I think there's that kind of motivating and competitiveness factor that comes along with that. So I think the challenge is trying to find the best framework that best matches up with the industry that you're in. And so for some, it might be SASB. Others, it might be GRESB.
I can only relate on it that we also use in the Nordic GRESB as the highest standard in real estate.
That's good. I think this is a great space to be competitive in. I think you all agree, so we're lucky about that. I want to preface the next question with a picture. So if you see on my newly shared screen, I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn in my role, and I come across a lot of memes like this because I follow a lot of sustainability topics and people. And it seems to me that there's a lot of pressure and expectations on sustainability, not only as a function, but a lot of more companies want to be sustainable more than before. So the question here is, if somebody wants their company to step up their sustainability actions, how should they start with reporting? And what problems might they face? Is it just a matter of approving the budget, or is there a better place to start? What do you think? I'll leave it open if somebody wants to jump in.
Yeah, I guess I can start, and I think the other ones will pick up. But I think if you want to start reporting, I think you should take a step back and start to figure out why you want to report, what's the purpose of it, and really identify that. Is it due to our investors requesting it? Is it for our customers? Why do we, or is it due to this regulation like CSRD, but that will be used by other stakeholders or investors and so on. So really thinking about the why, because that sort of sets how you would approach the reporting, and also, what things you would do. I think if you just start with reporting without really knowing what you're doing, the best case is that you end up in reporting nothing, and the worst case is that you sort of end up and report misleading information or information that's just not relevant to your stakeholders. So think about the why, I'd say. I don't know about the rest of you.
The why.
Yeah, I'm curious on Claudia's perspective on this too.
Yeah, very unexpected to see this picture, I think, nowadays, because if it was shown maybe 10 or 20 years ago, I would say that at that time, sustainability was considered as CSR or even as philanthropy, excuse me. But it was so. So nowadays, I would say that it's no longer topical. Because if you are into the reporting process, and if we look into CSRD, as I said before, look at it as a transformation opportunity. So basically, we at Rumble, we recommend here 4 steps, which are crucial, and it's no longer an option whether to do it or not, if you were a listed company and if you were reporting on the NFRD, because then you are in the group 1 and you should report already next year for the financial year 2024. So basically 4 steps what we recommend to our clients is, of course, first scoping, double materiality, gap assessment on ECRS, road mapping, action plan, implementation of the action plan, and then reporting and disclosing what you have identified. But this is just a rough, brief, maybe, description of what it might lead you to. So I can only relate with Johan that don't look and consider it as an obligation. It's just a chance for you to transform your business.
Well, and I'm kind of curious as well. One of the things that I did a couple of years ago was join an organization called the National Association of Corporate Directors, and went through some training with them, in part because I wanted to better understand the conversation in the boardroom. And so maybe this is a kind of stereotypically capitalistic American perspective here, but we're seeing more increase of tying executive compensation to corporate sustainability performance. I'm sort of curious if that's happening in Europe as well, or was it already sort of happening there? But I think it is novel to the US. But I think what we find is companies perform when their executives get their bonuses and compensation based on their level of performance. And absent that, it's really hard. We do end up with those memes, right, of the sustainability department of one otherwise. But when the CEO is responsible for it and tied to compensation, not surprisingly here, we get a lot more action that happens with it.
But maybe I can jump in here. That's very interesting. I don't think personally that I have seen that so much in Europe, but yeah, the others here might have another view. But I'm thinking that doing that type of motivation probably leads to more greenwashing than real changing in the business. Like, for me, I think that this sustainability earmarked budget, if we call it like that, should be quite small, because the point is that it should be part of the actual business and the different functions and the day-to-day operations to do things in a more sustainable way. And that specific budget might be, okay, we need a tool to gather the data, or we need to get this certification, and therefore we have a budget. But the sustainability as such, one doing whatever type of company you are, should be like built into the business. And it's not a specific big budget. So yeah, that's just my view on that meme, at least.
Again, just add, on whether or not this is being measured. It is a disclosure under ESRS, so, and it has been in GRI before. So hopefully it's being more incentives close or connected to ESG performance. But I absolutely agree with Rana. And there was a study from UK, which will not be covered then by CSRD since Brexit, but since the executives were responsible for it, they also tended to set kind of low targets. So they saw that those that have been having it connected to incentive or remuneration had been setting lower targets. So yeah, let's just hope that doesn't continue going forward, because that would be a shame.
Yeah, that makes sense. It can be very easy to save the world if you set very easy targets.
Exactly.
I'm going to move on to the next question. And I think there are many things in the world that we don't know how they're going to change. But one thing that I know for sure is that technology will continue to play a big part. And I think I'll turn to you, Rana, for this one. How do you think technology will play a role in sustainability, whether it's following CSRD rules or any other CSR ESG effort?
Well, I think it already plays a very big role. If you think of technology in a broader sense, it's already used in healthcare to a certain extent. It's definitely used in building constructions, which you would know more about, Pete, or to have smarter supply chains, or for climate smart solutions, smart cities and whatnot. So I think there is a very close, although indirect, connection between technology and sustainability. And then connected to the reporting rules, I think that, of course, there will be a need for smart tools, platforms, data integrations, data analysis. It's a little bit like a new version of ERP systems, but for another area, right? So of course, there's going to be a need for technology support there. But also, I think there are many untapped potential areas that where technology will even have a bigger role. I can just give an example from Sweden, where there has been a lot of interesting news stories lately because an entrepreneur made a database out of all available public information around invoices in the public sector and connected an AI algorithm on it to find anomalies. And they could find that some municipalities have been frauded by being scammed, basically, or somebody had paid their friend some sort of fee that they shouldn't have, and it's more connected to equality, corruption, and transparency. But that is a tool. It's a technical tool, and it's even using AI. So I think there's definitely a lot of space here where technology will play a role. We're also seeing more and more focus on how to code, architecturally, how to write programming in a way that reduces the energy consumption, and that kind of thinks about the whole life cycles, both in product development, hardware and software. This is also like, how much time do we have? But yes, I do see that technology can play a very important role here.
I can only add on that the requirement of CSRD is that the reports are machine readable, that they are digital. So there is plenty of opportunity for this transition. But also, as Rana mentioned, that there are upcoming new tools to assist companies to run their ECRS assessment. For example, we in Rumble, we have already created CSRD Navigator tool, which helps companies, for example, to conduct this CSRS gap assessment, to support the analysis, to actually analyze where is your way of growth. So there are plenty of opportunities here.
Again, if it's okay, Sebastian, I can just add, since I'm representing a tech company also, that we're offering a ESG platform that helps companies exchange sustainability data. So we see it as a LinkedIn for sustainability data, basically. And there are two sort of dependencies for that to work. The first one is that the data need to be standardized. We've been trying to do it following GRI over the years, but with the SRS and also ISSB, which is another standard, but that will present great opportunities. The second part is that it's digitalized, so that's what we are doing. So when it comes to data exchange, especially not only within organization, but also between organizations, that's what we do. So making that much more efficiently will also help companies to make more sustainable decisions when it comes to selecting suppliers, but also for investments, like investors when they want to reallocate capital and so on, to get that data more seamlessly than today. And
I think it was, okay, Pete, did you want to jump in as well?
Well, I was just going to add a little bit from the real estate sector. So I think I mentioned 42% of global greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to the built environment. Traditionally, we've talked about that in terms of operating carbon, which is predominantly from energy use, and that's about 25% total. But even there, while we still have a long ways to go, the built environment's sort of lags. We struggle at times to get energy data out of buildings, especially multi-tenant buildings too. I think that's an area where the tech industry has largely targeted and tried to address that, make it easier to get that data out, make it easier to understand when buildings are working optimally or not working optimally. So there are a number of tools out there. I still think lots of opportunity. But that's 25% out of the 42. The other 17% is in embodied carbon. So that's what goes into the materials that are used to construct these buildings. And I would say our industry really has only turned our attention to that with a lot of effort in the last 5 years or so. And that is an area that we absolutely need more technology and tools to help us understand the true supply chain that goes into construction. I mean, there's a lot more than just concrete and steel and glass, and that's about as much as we seem to have any sort of handle on right now. So that's if there's a call to action or an ask for help there from tech, I think that's an area that we could use an awful lot of support.
And that's good. And accidentally kind of getting into answering an audience question. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. I think we're getting there quite soon, but I'll just lift it up now because it's related. So from Ms. Curley, the question is, how do you see the future of CSRD reporting evolving with advancements in AI and machine learning? So Rana, you mentioned a tool in Sweden that took advantage of this. Do you see any other way, any one of you, how AI will change how we look at this kind of reporting?
If I may, because this is something I think about on a daily basis almost. So CSRD has a requirement that the data needs to be machine readable. So, and the EU will provide something called ESAP, which is like a big database sometime in 2030 or something, not really clear when. But so making all data available from CSRD reporting. And I think there's an endless pool of opportunities for companies there to just do their magic on that data. So when we have that data machine readable or in a digital format structured, then there's so much analytics that can be going on that. So I think that is gonna be the timing when we really can get the benefit from CSRD. I don't know if anyone else have anything to add there.
Well, I won't add. I just would maybe respond, Johan, and say that's exciting to hear, because one of the concerns I always have when regulation is passed is who's there to audit it and what's their level of competency. And one of the things we struggle with in the ESG world is a talent pipeline right now. It's such a new and fast growing field that even some of the regulations that get passed, I always wonder how enforced is it going to be if we're relying on people to do the work. So you sharing about the machine readability of it, I would hope is going to lead to better quality and more enforcement of it there. So that was an unknown to me. I thank you for helping address that.
That's good. Making connections.
I can only relate to what you all said, that actually the AI will be very helpful in such exercises as, for example, data collection when conducting double materiality assessment, or, for example, for predictive analytics, or, for example, for scenario analysis. So basically, these future tools will help more to prioritize your actions and your strategies.
Maybe we'll get back to technology later. We'll do one last question before we head over to answering the other audience questions we have. And I think, Claudia, maybe you can start on this one as well. If I'm a small company, or let's say a small and medium business, and I want to start practicing in the reporting sustainability, I heard what you said before. I heard what Johan said about getting a why, and there's a few parts to get started. But what if I think it seems like it's too much, like it's overwhelming? Are there any tips you have to kind of manage the workload that comes with doing this?
It might be overwhelming in the beginning unless you prioritize. So basically, take an opportunity to look at your business, to structure it, and look first at the governance level. How do you govern your small and medium enterprise? Do you have all policies at place? Do you have all processes at place? Do you have your value chain mapped or supply chain mapped? And do you understand the real impact of your business and your processes? So start from there. We do advise our clients to report according to different standards. And for example, the newly coming communication and progress of the UN Global Compact. It requires also to quite structure your business before you start filling in the questionnaire. It's a more light version of reporting, so to say, but anyway, consider it as an opportunity to structure the business. So even for small and medium enterprises, look at the first governance level, then decide what material topics are prioritized for you. Would it be human rights if you supply a lot of products? To what countries do you supply? Look, for example, into environmental impact and measure calculate greenhouse gases and measure CO2 impact of your products and look into other topics, for example, labor rights and etc., depending on what is priority for you and what is priority for your stakeholders.
And maybe a good idea is to contact an expert.
Maybe.
Yeah, just to add on what Claudia said, the latest, if it's fine, if we have 1 minute, I'll be quick.
Yeah.
But we are SME, we have about 100 employees and are in the tech space. But given we work with sustainability, we did a double materiality analysis, and what we think that we will start to report on, even though we're not covered by this legislation, is the data privacy and the data security, because we're a data platform. So, and that's what's relevant to our customers. So that's what we will prioritize when we start to report. So figuring out what's important to stakeholders, whether it's customers or investors, is really crucial if you want to be selective where to start.
I can just add one final thing also. I was going to say exactly the same thing as you, almost, that even being a smaller company that's not yet kind of obliged by the regulation, it's good to, answering your question, Sebastian, if you're a smaller company, you feel overwhelmed, it's still good to start before you actually have to do it by law in a way, but it can also uncover exactly that, what Johan mentioned, what is important for the company, for the business, for the stakeholders. And also it can give you new business ideas. Like we created this green coding course when we started to look at these things, for example. So find some champions in the company, even if you're not mandated by law, to start working with this, because it will actually give more than one think just by looking at it. It's beyond checkboxes, because you really have to dig and think in a different way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for adding that, Rana. And I think with that, we will move into audience questions. So if you haven't had a chance to ask your question yet, please do so in the chat or you're watching this probably on YouTube, and we'll try to get to an answer. We do have a few questions already. The first one was about AI that we covered before. There is another one here that it's kind of an extension. So what are of what we just discussed? What are the first steps for teams like HR, sales, and marketing when they just start reporting? How should their daily routines change? And I got a nudge also to ask you, Johan, first.
Okay. So we're saying, how should HR, the marketing, and the sales department
For instance,
I think it's good if they have someone in the company coordinating the work. So even though sustainability should be integrated, it's great if someone coordinating it. But going back to basically what Claudia talked about in the double materiality analysis, try to do like a gap analysis. If you're in the HR department, identify like, okay, what type of policies do we have in place? What are we missing? How are we able to describe the things we're meant to describe and so on? And so that would be for the HR. I separate that one from the other because that's the own operations, whereas sales and marketing is perhaps more customer facing downstream. I'd say they could start. I don't have a good answer where they should start, to be honest.
That's fair. And maybe the daily routine doesn't change so much, but it's actually something that ramps up over time.
Yeah, absolutely. They might identify stuff that they are missing things when it comes to measuring customer satisfaction, for example. Like after they have done the gap analysis, they will identify most likely that they are missing stuff, and then just start to implement practices for that.
Did you want to add something, Claudia?
Yes, if I may, I would like to add to what just Johan said. above assessing actually and identifying material risks, opportunity and impacts, CSRD requires also assessing financial effects. So I would recommend basically what these departments never did before, to look not only from the material perspective, but what double materiality requires also financial effects. That would be a new exercise for them.
Yeah, probably. Could be. Thank you. The next question is, and this also relates to something we touched briefly on, are there specific industries or sectors that stand to benefit more than others from embracing CSRD reporting as a tool for growth? And I think we talked a little bit about using it as a ideator for new possible business. But you see any industry that has extra much to gain from embracing CSRD?
Those that are listed, I would say, more than those that are non-listed. So CSRD will also cover non-listed companies. We are not listed, having private equity backing us. So, but for the listed ones, because like pension funds and large investors will look at your CSRD reporting, this will be included in the ESG ratings that different rating house provides and so on. So if you're listed, absolutely. And I'd say specifically if you're in one of the high impact sectors that has been identified by EU. So yeah, if you're in real estate, yeah, Pete's industry, or in retail, for example, and so on.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I view if opportunity was the question, greatest opportunities probably exist in transforming a sector from being a laggard into being a leader. If you're already a leader, then it is probably more about compliance there. And that's where I think of, I mean, I know we're using the word materials a lot. I mean, construction materials, what goes into constructing these cities and roads that we're surrounded by. And that is where it is in its infancy right now. We still struggle to get what we call EPDs, environmental product declarations, to understand the supply chain and the carbon that goes into your carpet and glass and steel and all of these things. And so right now, I would say we're still very much in a reporting standard here, where we're just trying to collect the data. And then hopefully, as we collect more of this data, we can use it to start to inform good decisions and drive a decision-making process that allows for lower embodied carbon to be in the built environment there. And so that's, I feel like, the next step that will come with it too, is trying to figure out how to do that here. So I would say that is a market that is ripe for opportunity because it has so far to go, and that gap it will be filled in part by tech and a lot of hard work.
Johan, okay, Claudia, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's really hard to speak from the industry perspective, but what Johan said about listed companies, we just have to remember that listed SMEs will have to report according to CSRD obligatory from the 2028. And for the first time, we hear that non-EU parent companies will also have to report from 2028. So this concerns those companies who have strong presence in the EU through branches or subsidiaries. But for the first time, it's, I think, revolutionary that the EU CSRD directive will cover also non-EU companies.
Johan mentioned before that listed companies probably stand to have a good opportunity more than some other non-listed companies, especially. But how does reporting, ESG or sustainability reporting, influence investor decisions, access to capital? Do you think that there will be an impact on being able to raise new capital if you're not reporting proactively? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I can go first shortly. Yes, I do think it will have an impact. And even if you're not part of the scope, you might be, because you might be delivering to something to somebody who is part of the scope. So then we have kind of a supply chain question. But I think going back to what we initially said in the conversation, some of these steps in the beginning is basically about creating a baseline. It's getting that machine readable, analyzable data. And from that, you can see who's kind of best in class, and it gives an incentive to improve and to have higher ambitions. So I think that it will be one of the things that you look at, like you do with financial information, with retention of staff, with EMPS, with whatever other things that are kind of metrics or KPIs for how well an organization or a company is doing. So I think it's creating a baseline that will make it difficult to not at least get above the threshold in these areas, because then it's better to look at another company if I'm an investor, for example.
Yeah. I can answer with some absolute certainty, because we're already seeing it impact investor decisions. I get approached at least monthly by somebody that is trying to get equity to finance a development project. And the banks here in the US have all essentially committed to ESG criteria. The UN Sustainable Development Goals is one of the frameworks that they often reference there. And it's a very competitive environment right now in real estate. Interest rates are up, construction costs are up. It's hard to get projects funded. And when banks, and not just the classic banks out there either, there are a lot of hedge funds and institutions that indirectly invest in real estate as well. They've established ESG criteria that is now a requirement for getting access to that capital. Here in the States, the term ESG has been politicized, unfortunately, but I think a safer term is responsible investing. So those organizations are all saying it's material to us to understand, and what is your climate resilience plan if you're developing this project in the state of Florida, right, which is going to be subject to flooding, or in California with the wildfires. Unfortunately, what's happening is with these calls that we're getting, projects have already started or in design or in construction, and now they're having to move backwards to try and appease the investors, and that's hard and that's expensive there. So the smart developers are getting out ahead of that and actually developing sort of an ESG prospectus with their projects to be able to take it to those equity partners and investors, say, here's what we're doing to address this proactively, and thinking about it.
Okay, thank you, Pete. And I think we will wrap it up right about there. We are slowly running out of time, and I want to thank our participants here in the panel so much for joining us. We will send an email to everybody who joined as listeners and viewers with contact information, so they know how they can get in touch with you if they have follow-up questions or need to talk more. I will also share this screen here for other purposes. You pick up your little phone and scan it, and you will get to the Beetroot Sustainability Report. That could also be useful for some of you. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, all our listeners. Thank you, panelists, and see you next time on a Beetroot event, hopefully.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.